30, 40, 50 years. And there's a direct link in terms of what's happened with that loss of land to the loss of being able to pass wealth down in our families. And so that's a major issue and concern, because when we talk about pathways to both wellness and wealth, why is it that white families tend to have 10 times the wealth of African American families? Is it just that African American families, haven't been able to save? That's not the total issue. Is it an issue of institutional racism and systemic racism? There's a lot more on that side that talks about what happened to Black wealth. And then we want to address a little bit in terms of what can we do about this. And so I really want us to think about this, and also think about, as we're talking about not only building wealth in our families, but we also have to think about what's happening with, or what will happen with our children, with our grandchildren. The fact that land also connects us with our culture. Land connects us with our family histories. And land is also something that once you have it, as my father used to say, because I inherited a piece of land, farmland, from my dad. He once told me that, if you ever, lose your job and have nowhere else to go, you can always come back here, put you up a little house, raise you some chickens, fish in the pond, and, raise a cow too, and you'll always have some place to stay and eat. And so we have to think in terms of those practical terms of what's happening in terms of that. So I'd like to really bring in Karen Gant, and as I mentioned, she teaches business law at the University of Hartford in Connecticut, and I wanted her to talk a little bit about one of the reasons, or some of the reasons why she's really interested in this particular topic. So Karen, welcome. Karen, can you hear me? You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
There you go. Another Mercury retrograde thing was about to happen.
I know.
Well, I am delighted that we're having this conversation today, and particularly since, we've been friends for so long, and I think we first started talking about this issue maybe, about 5 years ago?
Maybe. I don't know. Probably over 40 years we've been building up to this,
Yeah.
I think it's so funny that you have little pieces of information. I go to law school. We're political science. We have little pieces, like we know about civil rights, and we know about housing discrimination. We know about employment discrimination. But to really pull it all together to see how it impacts families, how it impacted the Black community as a whole, it is quite a different story. I think I first really started looking at land loss, well, particularly Black land loss, because I looked at land loss for poor, just poor people, period. But as far as Black land loss, there was this excellent article that came out in the beginning of maybe around 2000, 2001. And it was called Torn from the Land. And it was written by the Associated Press. And they went through and they documented land that was taken away either by mob violence, by trickery, or by legal means. And it went all the way back to maybe 1900s, or, it went back a long ways. And I wish I could remember the exact year, but I can't. And so they documented this pattern of how African Americans were cheated out of their land or driven off of their land. Some examples, legal methods would be, and this Fran definitely can talk more about this, during the wars, the government could come in and they could seize land, saying, we need this land, we have to build an airport here. And so they took the land, and, when you take land under the Fifth Amendment, you have to pay for it. But the payments weren't fair. They weren't the same for white landowners as they were for Black landowners.
Right.
And so one case that I'll just mention in particular, there was in Florida, Vero Beach, Florida, where it was a black family that owned this land that was taken to build an airport or airstrip, whatever it was. And now, and it became spring training, the spring training facility in Florida, Vero Beach, Florida, for the LA Dodgers up until just a couple of years ago. And it's still a stadium. It's still, I don't know the name of it now, but I probably have it written somewhere, but it's it's a big stadium. And so that was his land. And you have to wonder, like, how much wealth would he have had? And after the war, he tried to get the land back, mm-hmm. but they wouldn't give it to him because the law says, well, they can give it to the city, they can give it to the state, they can give it to the town. And so that's what happened. So he never was able to get that land back. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the land was taken by mobs, by a white mob. There was a case, another Florida case, it just so happens, where a man, I think it was 18 families, and they were forced out of their homes. They fled because they were being attacked by a white mob.
And there was violence involved in this one in terms of, seizing the land.
Huh?
Yeah. So it was violence involved in this one.
Yes. It's a mob. They were attacked by a mob, so they had to flee. So this one particular landowner, and I'm sure it was the same for all of them, he sold 52 acres of land for $10.
Wow.
$10, because he had to get out of there. And so when the Associated Press did their study, they looked, you can go through the land records and look at how much that land is assessed at today. It's worth a lot more, but the assessed value of those that land for those 18 families was $4.2 million.
Wow.
And, who knows if they were able to ever get land again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So there's wealth, that's just gone.
Mm-hmm. So there's really a pattern of this happening all over the country to African American landowners,
Yes. So, and it happens to other landowners. It's not just African Americans, but the problem is it's a pattern, mm-hmm. And it was a systemic way that it happened to African Americans. One of my favorite stories is George Washington. Not the George Washington with the cherry tree or the...
Oh, not the president of the country, okay.
Not that George Washington, yeah. George Washington, he was a slave. And in 1870-something, shortly after slavery ended, less than 10 years after it ended, he purchased 250 acres of land. Imagine being able to save and purchase this land. So he did, and he paid his taxes on it. In 1900, he conveyed the land to his children. Mm-hmm. And they, in turn, conveyed it to their children. So in 1964, after they paid the taxes every year for 100 years, they said, you don't own this land. You have to get off, all of you. You never own this land. And they went to court, and it turned out that they really, legally, they didn't own the land.
Really?
Yeah, because it was swamp land, and somebody sold it to them. And they said, here's a quit claim deed. Now, all that says is we're giving you everything we own in this land, which they probably didn't own anything mm-hmm. in the land. And so the government said, well, we're going to take this. We're taking this land. And there was all kinds of notes in the file about this Negro family owning all this land. And so they took it. Even the judge said, please don't do this. Please don't. This is just a miscarriage of justice. But by law, they could take it. So they did. They said, no, we're going to take this land. Just a few years ago, I wish I could remember what year it was, but not too many years ago, I'd say within the last 10, 15 years, the governor of Alabama said, no, this was wrong. Here's your land back. Here's your land. He said this man did everything he was supposed to do. He did everything right, and this is just a travesty. So he was able to get his land back, and the children now have that land.
Wow. Well, yeah. So many people really equate, the theft of land or the violent taking of land, because I'm sure not a lot of people would know about the whole issue of, these gangsters coming in, mobsters coming in and taking someone's land, but particularly the issue around Tulsa and the fact that has been so in the news, particularly over the summer. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Tulsa.
So, and it's funny that a lot of people didn't know about Tulsa until this summer. So that is, what Greenwood, the Greenwood section of Tulsa was also known as Black Wall Street. And there were a lot of wealth. Blacks owned it, and they had stores, they had post office, they had banks, they had everything. They had great wealth. And a white mob came, I can't remember the story, they accused a black man was accused of looking at a white woman, whatever it was, and mob just came and they wanted to get this man, but the black community protected him. So the mob came and they just burned down the whole whatever, all of Black Wall Street. Not only did they burn it down, but the sheriff, actually deputized this mob. Say, yeah, you go ahead and do this. So it was the government actually involved, and the National Guard came in and they rounded up all the black families, and so those families couldn't even go to protect their property. So everything was lost, and to this day, it has not been rebuilt. They're trying now. They've sued, to be repaid for the loss of their homes, of their businesses, and to date they have not been able to. There were a number of court cases, and some of the best Harvard law graduates represent him, Charles Ogletree, and they said, nope, it's the statute of limitations has expired, can't get this land back, or you can't be compensated for it. Now there is a couple of moves for reparations, and there was just another lawsuit about maybe 2 weeks ago, to try to get that, to get reimbursed for this continuing impact that this had on that community. I mean, it's never been rebuilt. It's just whatever. It's just, there's nothing there, and this is the reason behind it, and the policies that were put in place after the bombing, so that they could never rebuild. Oh, you could rebuild, but you'll have to use the certain type of material, of course, the most expensive material. So you can't rebuild, right? Yeah. So it's just a continuing pattern in that instance. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, you talk about policies that were in place. If you look at the whole housing policy and how it impacted African American families, that's another thing. When we talk about individuals and wealth of individuals, remember that we couldn't. They had covenants in the deed saying you cannot sell to a black family, right? Do you remember this in the and it wasn't really until the 60s,
right,
that those covenants were no longer enforced. The FHA said, you cannot, we don't want you to have intermingling in the housing stock. And if you were an African American and you did get enough money to be able to buy property, you couldn't buy it in a predominantly white area, because that was closed off to you. Right. So you could buy it in a black area, but you couldn't get financing because it was too risky.
Yeah, yeah. And there even some examples that's present today in terms of what happens in terms of black ownership of homes being in, particularly white areas or areas that are, transitioning, where real estate agents would tell black homeowner to make sure that, there's nothing evident on your walls or in the household that you're African American. And they've shown how, that brings the value of the house down as well in terms of what they can ask for it.
Yeah. So all those things have influenced wealth of black families. Mm-hmm. In the I want to say the 70s or so, the housing market just took off, right, and the value of homes just really increased. Well, black families didn't have the homes, right? Yeah. Remember, because they couldn't get them. So while white families, and I say white families because other minorities were not allowed into these programs either, while they were getting FHA loans, they were getting other loans, VA loans, there were very, very few minorities, I could give you the statistics, but it's almost none, that were able to get these loans. Mm-hmm. So when the housing prices took off, the white families now had all this equity in their homes, and so, we want our children to go to college. Yeah, well, they have the money, to pay for their children to go to college. Exactly. But a similarly situated black family doesn't have that. Even if they may even have finally gotten a home, mm-hmm. but they don't have that equity. They don't have that build up and generation upon generation of that equity.
Yeah. And one of the things that used to amaze me hearing in terms of what some white families were able to do was that when a young couple gets married, that the parents or the in-laws contribute towards their first purchase of a home, which also gives them a leg up in terms of home ownership, accumulating wealth, having something, to pass down to their children. And it just keeps going. And that is so unattainable for vast majority of African American families in terms of that, because being able to pass land down into the family is almost a rarity. And this brings up one other issue I want to address with you too, Karen, before we bring Francis, Tim, and Lewis on, and that is, and I sent you this clip from Vice News about land loss of heirs property.
Yes.
And in terms of, we have these large families, and we find out particularly a lot in the South where there have been large families, and they may have owned quite a bit of land, but by the time you look at, the number of brothers and sisters and then their children, they never really separated that land. And, yeah, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that caused some major problems, and I think the American Bar Association really addressed this just within the last, I want to say 5 to 10 years. So what would happen is, the family would pass the wealth down to their children, and this couple had 2 kids, mm-hmm. and those 2 kids each had a family of 4 kids, right? So now 8 kids own this land, own this property, and then it keeps going. So there could be 100 owners of this piece of property. And so what would happen is you have some unscrupulous real estate agent, and all they had to do was buy out one of those 100 owners. Mm-hmm. And they could force the sale of that land. And that's what happened. So they would force the sale of the land. They'd be there, or they'd have, a friend there to buy it for virtually nothing.
Yeah.
And there were cases where then they turned around and they were able to sell it because they wanted that land for some sort of development. Mm-hmm. And they got it for nothing. And then they were able to turn around and sell it for millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, it was such an interesting piece on Vice News about that and it hit me very close to home too because it was they profiled a family in Louisiana, in Claiborne Parish, Louisiana, not far from where I own land. This large family, and this developer went in and bought some of the shares from some of the family members. And all he had to do was go to the property tax office, find out those who were living far away, who were no longer connected to it, buy them out, and then put an ad in a newspaper that no one in that area reads. So they didn't even know that their land was. Right. Yeah, I mean, they had no idea that the land was up, but they followed the legal means. And so when the reporter from Vice approached one of the land developers who was doing that, the developer who was white, and he goes, "Well, you must think I'm the devil." And the reporter goes, "No, I don't think you're the devil, but what you did was evil,
Yeah.
And because it sold that land right off from under that family, and the family that was living there, farming it, paying the taxes all those years, thinking they were secure because this was family land. They lost their land. They had to move off, And to me, that was such a lesson for Black families, and I know a lot of them here in the South that all own some piece of heirs property, and need to talk to each other about what we're going to do, how we're going to secure this, and make sure that it stays in the family.
Yes. So a number of states since then, since the new laws were drafted, put in a provision that the families have first right of refusal. So it's not as easy to come in and take that away from a family, but it still could happen. Suppose the family, they have the first right of refusal, but what if they don't have the money? They could still wind up losing it. I did see a family, at least one family, where they decided to take that land and put it kind of into an LLC, so that it couldn't really. It'd be a lot harder for somebody to come in and try to sell that land from under them.
Wow, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So anybody out there that you have part of heirs property, start talking and looking at what you need to do to keep that land in the family.
Exactly.
Because that is so important. Well, I want to bring Fran in, but before I do, Karen, can you give us a little idea about what connection you now have to Harris Neck, and then Fran can tell us a little bit about the history in terms of what's happening there.
Well, I was fortunate enough to meet Fran through you, but I had started one of the areas of land loss that I was also exploring was the Gullah population, because this is a culture within the Black community that we really need to preserve.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they owned land between North Carolina all the way down to Florida. There were all these groups of Gullah who owned property, and they're losing their land, because it's right along the sea coast, right? And some
beautiful part of the country.
That's what I hear. I've seen a couple of the islands, and they're islands, so let's there's real estate developers that want to get that land. Some have been removed from the land, taken off of their land. I know there's another group, not Harris Neck, but another group where they're really trying to get that land, and the taxes have increased like 300%. Air property is an issue too. So all of these issues are hitting these seacoast areas owned by Gullah communities, of which Fran is one of those communities, and they have been fighting.
Absolutely, and I'm so excited about Fran coming on. And Fran, are you there?
She's got mute.
Yeah, while she's unmuting herself. I just want to let you know that, Frances Timmons Lewis, I've known her quite some time because she's also my sister-in-law. Now I'm going to take that in-law part out. She's my sister. And she has a fascinating family history, in terms of, that land, that connection with culture, that cultural aspect that even goes back to and have been identified with certain areas on the western part of Africa. And in addition to that, Fran is heading a group now called the Direct Descendants of Harris Neck, where they're working and have been fighting for some time to get the land that was taken back from them. And her whole family, including her brother, Reverend Edgar Timmons, have been fighting the good fight for years in terms of this. So, Fran, can you give us a little background about Harris Neck? And I just want y'all to know, too, we were having technical difficulties with her, too. That's why you don't see her, but you should be able to hear her. Okay?
I think she's on mute.
Yeah, you muted yourself again. Are you there?
We're trying.
Okay, we hear you. Hi, can you hear me? She's muted again. Okay, while they're working to get her unmuted. Hey, can you hear us?
Yes, right now, yes.
Excellent. Well, I just tell them the reason why they can't see your beautiful face. I saw her for a second on FaceTime. She's looking wonderful in a beautiful hat, but she has an incredible speaking voice. But Lord, you all will hear her sing. So, but Fred, I just wanted you to talk a little bit. I don't know if you how much of our conversation you've heard, but I am so excited about people to get to know what I know about Harris Neck, Georgia, and the fight that you all have been fighting. So can you give us a little background about what happened to your family and the other direct descendants of Harris Neck?
Okay. It was back in 1943 that the government decided that it needed approximately 2,000 acres of land, which was predominantly owned by my grandfather, grandmother, and...
Hey, you there? Look like we're muted again.
I'm so sorry. Hello?
We're here. We can hear you. And I have to tell people, too, you're inside a historic church down in Harris Neck. First AD?
Yes. It's 153 years old. We just celebrated our 153rd anniversary on the 6th of September. So it means a lot to us because this church was dismantled. Now, when the government came in and gave...
Okay, we've lost...
They threatened to even burn this church down. Wow. But it was my grandfather, who was the chairman of the church at that time. He went to the government officials and told them that if they burnt down this church, he guaranteed they'd never burn down dismantle the church. To bring it to the president's site.
So they moved the church.
Really means a lot to us.
Yeah. You're fading in and out a little bit, so I'm going to try to fill some things in for you, Fran. So the church was moved, but one of the other things that happened in 1943 as well, when they came, the military came to Harris Neck to take that land over as a land strip. There was a question about something that happened with the cemetery where your ancestors were buried in as well.
Oh, yes. This is just horrible. Apparently there were two cemeteries, and this one was closer to the church in Harris Neck. And the government said that they needed that land as well. There were approximately 25 loved ones in that cemetery. They promised that they would rebury our loved ones to another site. But after everything was done, we could never find it. They could never find it. This second grave yard was never found. We're hoping that another search will be made and we can locate it and have another burial ground built, or those bodies be moved to the present cemetery that we have, Gould Landing Cemetery. And that's a beautiful cemetery. I don't know of any African American family or church that has a cemetery that is located down by the riverside. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So there we are.
Yeah.
Hoping and praying.
And as we're talking about that cemetery, and particularly in terms of how far back it goes in terms of history, one of my concerns is that, some of your ancestors and others who were buried there died while they were either enslaved or right after slavery. So there's a lot of history there that's associated with that cemetery.
Yes. It breaks our heart every day that we think about it.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about what your grandfather had on that land and what that community was like? Because it sounds so similar to me to what Black Wall Street in Tulsa, in the Greenwood District, in terms of a thriving community that set up in the, those families were pretty self-sufficient, right? Okay, well, you muted again. Okay, while she's unmuting and getting her sound back, being that far out, there is a problem with connection as well in terms of where they're located. So we'll just be patient. But Karen, we've talked about that cemetery in terms of, where it may be, and wondering whether or not the military actually moved those cemeteries.
Yeah, and trying to actually maybe go back to the archives. I know I'm a nerd, right? and
got so excited, y'all, when we were like, "Ooh, we could go to the National Archives
and we could just look and do research and try to find, what the military did, because they have to have good records, right? Of anybody, they're very detailed. And we could probably find them and find out whether they even really did move, move the graves.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I was wondering about, and particularly because Karen and I both finished from Howard University, and several years ago, it's been more than this, several years ago, there was a major effort by Howard in their archaeology department to, in New York City, going back in when they discovered a graveyard for slaves there, and doing a historical dig, and that part was sectioned off. I think it became a historic landmark as well, and that's something that should really happen in Harris Neck also. Fran, are you back with us?
Okay, I think so.
Okay.
Okay, let me share
it's technology and it's Mercury retrograde, so everything's happening. So, but can you tell us a little bit about your grandfather? Because I'm fascinated with him.
Okay, I'm back. But the name of my grandfather was William Timmons, and he owned over 300 acres of land. Not only that, but he had an oyster factory where he employed women and the men. The women were the shuckers. They were the ones who opened the oysters, and the pickers were those who went out to, of course, pick the oysters and bring them back to his plant. So it was very successful. And not only did he have that oyster business, but he did a lot of farming, the cane, the sweet potatoes, and just a very prosperous man. His house was like 7.
I know, folks. I know this is a little frustrating because I want to hear the story again. But yeah, not only did her grandfather have that. You there, Fran?
Yes, and
okay.
So I'm so blessed because I'm named after his wife, Frances. I'm so proud of that name.
Yes.
So that also gives me even more determination to help the families and the community here to regain.
Yeah, they're in the process now of trying to regain their property back from the feds. Karen, can you talk a little bit about that process too, in terms of what they've been going through from what you've read? Because her brother, Edgar Timmons, who is a minister, a prominent minister down in that area, he's been fighting this, as we would say, the good fight over this land issue, probably since the 1970s, 1960s, 1970s.
70s, yeah.
Yeah.
So similar to that case that I mentioned to you in Florida, where that land became a training facility for the LA Dodgers. Mm-hmm. After the war was over, Fran's family wants to get the land back, mm-hmm. right? Just like the land in Vero Beach. They've been fighting to get that land back. And instead of turning it back over to them, they don't. The government doesn't need it anymore for an airstrip. Instead of turning it back over to them, then they give it to the city, right, or the state. And I think that's what happened in Fran's case. But the state or the city, whoever took it, didn't manage it well. So the federal government came back in and took it over. Mm-hmm. It's never gone back to the family.
Right, and that's how a good piece of it ended up as a wildlife refuge.
Yes.
As well.
Owned by the Department of Interior, right? The federal government, right? So the federal government came back and took that land.
Right. Yeah. And so if we're able to get Fran back, she can tell us some of the newest development, but in terms of what's happening. But Karen and I have been working with Fran and her family and some of the descendants about this. Are you back, Fran?
Yes, for the moment.
Okay. Well, quickly, tell us what's happening now in terms of, with you all meeting with the Department of Interior. Whatever you can share.
Oh, yeah, we're very, very excited about this. Actually, we've been working with FSW for approximately...
And FSW is Fish and Wildlife. Association. And part of what they've been doing is that there's a land developer and this organization called the... Karen, is it Harris Neck Land Trust?
Yes.
Yeah, Harris Neck Land Trust. And they want to come in and develop this land, and they made a proposal to the Department of Interior. And, it looked wonderful on paper, but part of the issue that Fran and the families in that area have had was that no one connected to the direct descendants were consulted about this. And it's just another instance in terms where land may go from the original families that owned it to, these developers and just totally bypass, the descendants of the people that the land was taken away from. And that's a huge issue.
can I just say, so it looks like Harrisburg land trust. I mean, I didn't understand it at first. I thought, well, isn't that the families? No, so the land is going to go to a developer, right? There's nothing going to the families, you know. So if you're going to give the land back, don't give it to a private developer, right? Give it to the family. That's what the Harrisburg Land Trust, sounds like. It sounds like it's a trust for the descendants, but it's not.
It's not. So
not at all. Not at all. Maybe they'll put up a little museum to honor the Gullah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's what they planned. But, yeah.
And that's a major issue in terms of, that history that could be lost, but also righting the wrongs of, what happened with those families. And I know that part of what the Harris Neck direct descendants are asking for is a return of some of that land so that they can have that in their families. And so that may be one piece. And right now they have no idea whether or not that part is going to happen, but they do want to say, in terms of what happens with that land and moving forth, being a part of that and being recognized also in terms of the history of what happened there. So, Fran, are you back?
For 1 second.
Yeah,
no. Okay, remember, we're only 7 miles from the Atlantic Ocean, okay? So when it's windy out there, a lot of our connection is right out there in the ocean. Blame it on the ocean.
So, and Fran's brothers are shrimpers, and that's what her father was as well.
Oh, yes.
Very respected in that area. And so you all may have to get back out on the shrimping boat to try to pick up your reception,
And not only with the shrimp, but the crab, the blue crabs, the Georgia blue crabs. Yes, that's a big business of ours as well. And last but not least, the oyster business. Now that is, I'm serious. We have the best oysters in the world. Okay. So
we're still have 100 people on a flight down to Harris Neck, Georgia, and just
it's beautiful. It really is. So my brothers definitely are carrying on this legacy, this wonderful thing that our grandfather initiated, and he worked it for years and years. Very successful. Very successful. It is so sad how it ended, but it was only temporary, okay? Because we're not giving up. And I truly do believe we're faith believers that what we once had will be returned again.
Absolutely. And you all have something major coming up this coming Saturday too, right?
Yes, we do. We have 2 meetings on Saturday. We're really looking forward to it. It's the direct descendants of Harris Neck community. That's Saturday on the 26th at 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And it's for all of the direct descendants to come together and let's discuss. Let us discuss what we can do about the land issue. So working together is extremely important because we were sort of left out with this other organization.
And Fran, we didn't tell the audience about how many actual families are still connected to Harris Neck and what happened there with the taking of the land.
Okay, I think there were approximately 75 families in Harris Neck at that time. That was a pretty good number. Probably altogether about 600 or 700 individuals.
Wow.
Yes, because on Harris Neck, the original Harris Neck, we had a school, post office, a couple of stores, the oyster factory, of course, and a lot of farming land. land, a lot of that. It was a very beautiful, a very prosperous community, a community that was completely independent. And of course, that beautiful church. And the church back in that time, it had a beautiful organ. Now, you know I'm going to the music because I love music. In fact, we have a beautiful baby grand in this sanctuary right here. So the church was very elegant. The pews were bought and shipped from Germany. And we still have the church pews. They're still being used, and they're just as beautiful as they were back then. So with a community that believed in God and education, we had everything that we needed. And the future was great because the young men and young women, they were in school. They were learning lots of crafts by the mothers in the community that would get together, and they would make quilts. They would teach the girls how to do that as well. It was very resourceful. It was a wonderful group of people. And although in 1867, that's when the church was organized, but the community based on God first, education next, it was just really prosperous. Maybe too prosperous for some people to appreciate, especially being African American and being independent. Because here is my grandfather now. He's employing people. He's just a blessing. He was a blessing to the. I'm just getting a little emotional now. Okay. We're really hoping that we would be able to work out a wonderful agreement with the wildlife as well as the original descendants of Harris Neck. We understand that the wildlife is not responsible for this takeover, but they have been working with us, and I believe that we will be able to come together with a civil and a good agreement where it would benefit both of us, because there is enough land for the wildlife as well as ourselves to rebuild. I'd like to say something, if I may, Olga, that was so heartbreaking back in 1943. 43, when the residents were ordered out. Do you know they were not given any type of provisions? Many of my relatives, they had to make little shifts and shafts out of the palm trees. They had nowhere to go. The government did not provide, not even a tent. Many of them died from broken hearts and just could not withstand the pain that they were enduring. No arrangements, no provisions, no nothing. They had to leave everything to go to somewhere that had nothing for them. Nothing. cause pain. Many strokes, heart attacks died along the way. And I'm sorry. And I feel that trauma. I feel that pain even today. And when I go down to the cemetery, I cry each and every time, because I can only imagine. I cannot say that I can feel it. No, it's just too much. I can't. But what I do, it is sad, broken heart. Just, how do you treat human beings like that? You're going to order them out and not have some place for them to go? Not a camp, not a tent, nothing. So with the wildlife and others that FSW that we're communicating with now, that seems to be very compassionate about right and righteousness and fairness and justice. Right. Yes.
Yep.
A lot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's what I was gonna say. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, that's great. I hope that you do.
Ladies, I'm so sorry. Our audio is gone out, and we're no longer getting audio through the Facebook feed. Dr. Osby and Karen, your audio is totally out. And I anticipate it's probably something to the weather. We got most of the conversation today, but this was so very, very good, and I totally apologize. I guess it's just one of those days where I know outside we're storming here where our connection is. So I think it's a combination of all where we all are today. Okay. You all are talking now, and I can't even hear you. So I'm going to end the feed. I totally apologize. And Dr. O, I think this deserves another part 2, because it's such a great history lesson, and these some passionate stories also. So let's try to recoup, and we'll try to bring you guys back again to try to have a part 2 of this conversation. And but thank you all so very much. We're gonna wrap up now, and Dr. Ogle, we'll look forward to having you back next month on Pathways to Wealth and Wellness. This has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.